Computer time, or do we go with?
Probably the computer time is the more accurate one.
It being 3 o'clock, we'll call the meeting of the Maryland County Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee to order. First item is pledge of allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All members of the committee are present. Public comments, we have one person who has signed up, Veda Perkins, if you'd like to come forward. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Veda Perkins, 1803 Patriot Drive. I'm here to speak about the potential reissuance of an RFP for the dorm property. I'll be brief, but thank you for your time. I say 2020 was a time of high economic uncertainty. Stock market was down 30% in a matter of weeks. Banks were pulling back. Loans are financing for speculative real estate. And builders were either delaying or canceling projects due to labor shortages and supply chain disruptions. One could easily argue that, or debate that, 2020 is an economic anomaly in terms of a data point, that the lack of RFP responses in 2020 may not have been a true reflection of the property's potential value, but more along the lines of the unprecedented economic conditions that were presented to builders who were either stopping projects or, even if they had interest, probably would have had a hard time gaining capital in order to do such a thing. If we think back about what we were all thinking about in 2020, I'm thinking maybe responding to RFPs wasn't on the top of our list. So I would also, as a citizen, endorse, or I would say plead to the board that they would consider to reissue that RFP for two main reasons. Is one, it's a 5-year data point, and then two, the data point that you're really using today is an economic anomaly from 2020. And from that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right. Next item is the approval of the minutes from the July 9th meeting. What are your wishes? They're in the packet. Supervisor Lemmer moves to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Chair Gibbs. Any discussion? Not all those in favor of approval of the minutes will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Next item is review and acceptance of the 2024 audit, including review of the 2023 audit implementation plan and discussion of the proposed revisions to the fund balance policy. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Administrator Leonard, who will then introduce our other guest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. Just a couple of key points before turning it over to John and Sam. So it is agendized for action today relative to the 2024 audit, as you saw in the packet. However, they are draft financials. From my perspective, and having spoken with Sam, you don't need to take action today. In fact, we'll be back in August for you to receive that final audit. We will submit it, however, in July as is required. So the things that are still awaiting finalization, as you saw from the packet, is really a lot of the work that relates to the annual comprehensive financial report, which I'll touch on in just a minute. But adding some schedules, final approvals also of the discretely presented component unit, most notably North Central Healthcare. Their executive committee is slated later this month to finalize those financials. All that said, and I think I anticipate John and Sam will clear this up, nothing significant is really set to change in those financials. But again, you don't need to take any action today. We can do that in August. In terms of big takeaways, first thing I always look at relative to an audit is it clean? And the answer is yes. It's an unmodified opinion that is submitted. That's most important. And then I already referenced the annual comprehensive financial report but I can't make this clear enough. As I know this committee knows, the county hasn't had an annual comprehensive financial report that we haven't submitted or created since 2018. So following the implementation of our Workday system, this has been on my list as a key priority. It doesn't, again, that annual comprehensive financial report, which is in the packet, doesn't change the substance of the financials, but it really does demonstrate a commitment to excellence in terms of raising the level of transparency that we're striving for across the organization. My challenge to Sam, since she started, she's just about at a year in, was really to work to complete that post-audit. Sam did us one better. She's going to have it done by the end of July, which is required with our audit submission. So I really can't convey to you enough about the amount of work, how pleased I am, I should say, with the amount of work Sam has been and her team have put in. If nothing else, the financials this year probably seemed a bit different in that they're a lot longer. Well, the annual comprehensive financial report's 125 pages, so that's the principal reason. But it has a lot of that historical comparative data that Sam worked to pull together. So really couldn't be more pleased with that work product. In terms of substantive highlights, takeaway for me, so once Sam has been working on to get the audit completed, based on our fund balance policy, as was alluded to in the title, we utilize that fund balance rollover for capital funding. And I know the board has made some strategic decisions in recent years that we've talked about, and this committee has talked about. Staff have provided information, and ultimately, we've made some strategic decisions that do have a significant impact relative to that rollover and capital funding strategy. So when you look at the financials, what you'll see is an unassigned fund balance that had a significant reduction. It's a function of primarily most notably, I should say, the $8 million loan to Bug Tussle. Those funds that would otherwise be unassigned are now assigned. Similarly, the board in the budget process this year, for this year's budget, I should say, made some strategic decisions to buy down that tax rate relative to alternative funding for debt service. The combination of those things is that we actually fall below our working capital designation of our current working capital designation, not the one that the board is considering later this evening. So we don't have any CIP rollover that would otherwise populate that. That's a significant challenge we'll work through, and Chris is already working to identify some core needs, but I know this committee understands the difference between assigned, committed, restricted, non-spendable. I know that this group gets that, but I think that is important as we message with stakeholders and the public. When people see a reserve dollar amount, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have that. Well, it certainly doesn't mean that you have that amount of cash sitting waiting to be spent. So that is kind of one of the big takeaways that we'll work through. But overall, very pleased with, again, the state of our financials. I think we're in a strong fiscal position in terms of the work that Sam and her team have done this year. Much smoother process than in past years, and I appreciate John and all his team at Baker Tilly to help us through. But that's kind of the introduction, Mr. Chair, and I'll just, again, we don't need to take any action today. Feel free to ask questions, and with that, I'll turn it over to Sam and John.
So if you want to come forward and.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. And Lance, thanks a lot for that information going into it. I appreciate that. I'm going to echo a couple things that Lance mentioned. As I go through this, let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to spend most of my time on these 5 pages here, just 4 pages of data, really. that talk about where the general fund is and taking a look at your debt. Your financial statements are much larger than that, though, and have a lot more information. We typically lose people when we go through those. It's, like Lance said, it's a huge document. So this kind of summarizes some of the main areas. Before I do mention this, kind of walk through this, so just a couple quick things. So where we're at, we have issued a draft. We did that back on June 20th, as I look back at my Outlook calendar or messages this morning, which is a month earlier than last year. So even though we haven't issued, and we're going to issue in a similar time this year, we got a draft out a month earlier. And again, a lot of that credit goes to Sam and her team in finance and all the departments really that we work with here. And it's just about everyone. So there's a huge amount of effort that goes into it. And the fact that we got out that much earlier really is an attest to the improvements that have been made over the last year. So thanks again for that. As far as how the audit went, I'll just mention a couple of things. I already mentioned that we got it out earlier. You're back to producing the ACRA like Lance mentioned. This is a huge effort, and it has been 6 years since the county has issued this. Once you do have a draft, and once you get it in final, I'm going to really draw your attention to two primary sections. Well, really three. A couple up front. One is called the Management Discussion and Analysis, the MD&A. It's like an executive summary. Sam prepared that. We just reviewed it last week. And it doesn't take too long to get through it, but it's nice because it kind of tells you where the county is at today financially, or at the end of the year, I should say, compared to last year, and gives you some reasons or some explanations behind the changes, because that's important when you look at governmental financial reporting to try to understand the changes, and especially over a period of time. And speaking of period of time, in the back, you've got the statistical section, which is a lot of required schedules that GFOA asks for when you submit the report to them. And a lot of them go through 10 years of history. And again, you can see how debt has trended, fund balance levels, a lot of demographic and economic and just revenue capacity. There's a lot of good information in there. So I do draw your attention to that as well. So another thing is finance was definitely more prepared for us this year when we come in for the audit. We really appreciate that because we come in for a good, pretty good sized team. We ask for a lot of different things, and Sam and her crew, and again, others in the county really made some nice strides forward with that this year. So we're going to keep that trend going forward. We did still have some material entries. It's in the back of another document that we issue, about 10. I still consider that really very, very good. I always consider like 10 or fewer to be exceptional. In the past few years, we've had a fair number more than that. So again, significant strides forward with that. And some of those in the past have been the result of the ERP. As far as the reports that we're asking for out of the system, big strides forward in that as well. We really challenged, and I think this committee has some challenges in getting the reports that it was asking for. I think we have that worked out, at least from our end, and I know you're getting some of the reports too. So again, some more improvement. We did have a couple of restatements this year. One is in the landfill fund for some cell improvements out there that had not been depreciated in the past, so there was an adjustment for that. And then the social improvement fund, there was 3 smaller adjustments that added up cumulatively to be materials, so that got adjusted as well. And again, that goes back to the ERP system and its challenges with that over the last 2 years. Lance already mentioned this, but one of the main reasons you hire us, Baker Tilly, is to provide you that 3-page opinion in your financial statements, and we did issue a clean opinion. That includes implementing 2 new accounting standards this year, GASB 100, which gets at the restatements coincidentally, and how to kind of cleans up how that gets presented and the consideration of what level they fall into. And the other is GASB 101 regarding compensated absence, so accrued benefits. This changes back to 1993 when I first started doing this, where basically people got vacation and sick, and there's a lot of different types of benefits being offered these days to governmental employees throughout the country. So this kind of catches everything up. Your liability for that did not change significantly because of this new standard. So overall, just to summarize, definitely much better. Big improvement this year. We're on the right trajectory, and I feel like next year we can actually be perhaps meeting a month earlier. That we all have a common goal with that. So, but yeah, great improvement. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the numbers here. This first page, very similar slides as I've hit on in the past few years, is getting at your general fund balance. And as you know, this is the primary operating fund of the county. And governmental financial reporting, you can have basically 5 different buckets of funds at the end of the year. Like Lance said, it doesn't mean you have cash here, but it does correlate to cash, plus and minus the different accruals. And if we start on the bottom, this is non-spendable. The light blue are the 2024 amounts, and that's at $2.6 million. This is made up almost entirely of the non-county portion of the delinquent property taxes. Okay, statutorily, you have to assume those for collection purposes. And so those can take a long time to actually materialize, so it's a long-term receivable. GAAP says you have to set these aside as non-spendable. Restricted, same items as in the past. Again, these are external restrictions by grants or statutes. So this is the UW dorm maintenance funds that have been held on to for decades, really the last couple, 20 years at least. Land records, the amounts that they collect, and jail assessments. So not a big change for those. The $8 million in the middle here, that's again the amount that Lance mentioned. That's the Bug Tussle agreement or loan that's in there. Those funds have been set aside in the general fund as such, as being committed by resolution. Assigned is 10.8. So you can see it's up quite a bit, $10.1 million from last year. This is made up of primarily about almost that entire $10.1 million increase is from being applied to the budget you're operating in right now in 2025, okay? So big increase in that from last year. There's also about $400,000 in carry forwards in here, and then some smaller amounts for the ATC easement and compensated absence that you set aside some funds for retirement. Everything else gets rolled into unassigned, and again, just to echo Lance one more time, that went down this year. It went down $10.3 million because Bug Tussle went up and the amount you're applying to the budget went up, okay? So it's shifted as such. Overall, your fund balance in the general fund did go up $3.3 million. You budgeted to break even for the year, and it got there because your revenues came in about $5.4 million over. That was driven by amounts in excess of budget for sales tax, some federal grants that get run through there, and investment income. Investment income was a primary driver, and we've seen that everywhere we've gone this year. Expenditures are over budget by $2 million, so it reduces that excess of revenues a bit, which gets you to the 3.3. But if you looked at the expenditures, some things are over, of course, departmental-wise. Some are under financial administration, adult corrections, and the amounts transferred out for capital purposes were all over budget. Okay. There's a lot of detail on this in the back of the financial statements, if you're curious, on pages 78 to 83. Okay, next page. So if we hold that thought and we took it, what does that mean? So if you compare the what we say as being unrestricted, so it's the unassigned plus the assigned, because you have a lot of flexibility with those funds, and we compare that to your expenditures in the general fund, it gives us a ratio. And that ratio at the end of the year was 71%. You can see how that's trended over the last 5 years. It's been inching up just slightly over the last 4 years. If you're curious, how does that compare to other Wisconsin counties that we audit of your size? It's very similar. You can see 71%, 73% for the last couple of years. So you're right in the ballpark with other places that we see as far as fiscal management of the general fund. You do have a fund balance policy, and I know you're revisiting the working capital, I believe, this evening. But that is to basically maintain 1 month of working capital amongst those 3 different funds. Good. Then shifting gears, taking a look at your debt. And the page 3 here is your debt management, how much debt is outstanding. And we look at this from a statutory sense. That black line plotted out there for the last 5 years is your debt capacity or debt limit. There was an 8.5% increase this year. It's basically 5% of your equalized value, so nice steady growth in that over the last 5 years presented here. The red line below there is the actual debt, GO debt, that's outstanding. That went down about $5.5 million over the last couple of years each, as those bonds, primarily for North Central, are starting to get paid off. You do have a debt management policy that's spelled out at the top here. I think that's great. About, maybe half my clients do have that. It's much more restrictive than the statutory limitations. It's basically, instead of the 5%, it's taking 0.5%. If that were the case, you would be limited to $86.3 million in GO bonds. You are over that amount, but there's a big but or caveat with that. Most of that debt, almost all of it's actually not being paid through levy. It's being paid through what I would call user charges at the airport for a bit of it, just over $2 million there, and about $59 million for North Central being paid through the facility use agreement with them. Okay. So the county's only using 11% of your debt capacity. That was 12% last year, 15% 2 years ago. So it's inching downwards as your growth goes up, and those bonds are getting paid off just over $5 million per year. At the bottom of this page is a quick summary of your debt. You can see that 93 where that comes in between the county and the airport. Small amount for the forced crop loan it fluctuates a little bit each year. And again, the compensated absences of 4.3, the accrued benefits for county employees. If you're curious how you do, we used to put comparisons on here, but we stopped because of all the different nuances. But if you're curious, the Wisconsin Policy Forum, this link here has some really good information out there. And I encourage you to take a look at it. It's very useful. And on the last page is looking at how much debt do you pay during the year, principal and interest, so debt service. You can see it's inched upwards as those bonds we've been talking about have started to get paid over the last couple of years, but now it's flatlined. So 7%, we generally recommend trying to keep this about 20% or less. You're well below that. And again, those black dots represent other places that we audit, so very similar amounts as well for that area. Any questions on the numbers or anything else for that matter?
If any members have any questions? County board members? Go ahead, John.
No questions. I don't have anything else. Yep.
So one of the areas that we've done a lot of work, Sam has done a lot of work, is on one of the findings relative to cash and internal controls. Anything either of you guys want to talk through on that?
I think in 2025, we can expect that to drop off. We're making changes in our current procedures and policies to mitigate the reason for that finding.
Yeah, in the past, we did have a comment as well that we resolved this year regarding the ERP and just kind of all the different challenges with that. That is, as I've been saying for the last 10 minutes, much, much improved. I think, that's not completely unusual with such a large system implementation. But this year it just went much, much better. So the cash issue it's not a material weakness or significant deficiency, but it's something the county takes seriously, is trying to address. The decentralized accounts always present a risk anywhere we go. It's very common in counties especially. You have to serve the public. But yet with that, we'd like to see some additional controls or oversight. And we're not saying that's not happening. We just want to see it more centralized here within finance. So Sam and I have been talking about ways to address that. Yeah, this is the other report. I think it's part of your packet as well. It's called the Reporting and Insights. There's a lot of information in there, including the internal control matters that we just touched on briefly. The journal entries that I talked about are in the back there. There's a whole section of required communications, whether or not there were any disagreements with management, to consult other specialists or other firms, any fraud that we came across during the audit, new GASBs, a lot of different things in there. There's nothing of concern of that nature in there. Okay, although they do talk about the GASBs, and I guess that's it's not as concerning as it was a couple years ago. They seem to have slowed down with the accounting rules being rolled out, which is helpful to everybody throughout the country that works in this area. But yeah.
Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may not be for John, but last year we talked a lot about centralizing our finance, and you sort of mentioned it as a suggestion. Can you talk a little bit about what our timeline is for that and if it's still one of your priorities?
Sure, great question. And I think short answer is yes, it's a priority. I think we're really evaluating, and Sam and I can't remember if it was late last week or early this week that we've talked about it. We put a lot of effort. John alluded to, the experience being better during the audit, not just with finance, but with all the departments. Sam has done a lot of work strengthening the relationship and increasing the frequency of contact, I would say, with the finance professionals in other departments, most notably the sheriff's office and social services, but really across the board, including highway. So whether or not we have all those individuals directly report to Sam, or we have just, I don't know what I want to say, dual reporting. I'm not sure how that's going to shake out, but in terms of centralization, in terms of enhancing collaboration and information sharing, from my perspective, we've made a great deal of progress. I know we have quarterly meetings to look at the sheriff's office budget, to really talk through issues. Highway has some really strong individuals in place. Social services, Colleen is their lead finance person, she is essentially dual reporting right now to Sam and to Krista. So I'm not sure if you'll see an org chart that'll fundamentally look differently with finance is now 15 people as opposed to 6. But the reach of finance out in the departments, I think, is much more enhanced. I don't know if you want to add anything, Sam.
Yeah, and the other thing that we've been doing is working on that financial knowledge within not only the finance staff, but the management staff too. It continues to improve. Took a little bit longer than anticipated. We want to make sure that we're getting the right information out to people. So we took our time making sure the system was working correctly, that we understood everything that was in there before we give that information out to others so that they understand it and can better manage and look at their financials and ask the right questions.
So any other questions? Supervisor, Vice Chair Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that you had noted that the level of the legal budget control is by fund and appropriation unit. And is that common in counties, or what do you see for the legal budget?
It is common. I would say at the fund level, until you get to the general fund, where it's more at the departmental level or at the function level. Well, actually, lower than the function level. What is it, like the org level? That's the word I'm looking for, is generally what we see. Yeah. But it does vary. I mean, there's some nuances between counties. Yeah.
So I just followed up on that question. I asked John if, I know it was raised at this last meeting, are there counties that use program-based budgeting? I think to get at, kind of part of perhaps the question, what's the granularity of budgeting? I'm not aware of any county that does that. We attempted it for a couple of years, but it was wrought with challenge, and it's largely based on analytical formulas to assign people, but I just asked John and he didn't know of any either. So I think the way that, in my experience in interfacing with counties, I don't think we're an outlier in the way that we budget at all. But certainly there are alternatives in other states that they certainly do it differently.
One thing to consider going forward, and I don't think the county does this now, but GFOA also offers a certificate for a budget. Is the plan? Okay, good. Because that could provide some kind of a learning experience for that as well.
Is that for board members or for the staff? So maybe we should all take that. I think just following up on Vice Chair Marshall's comments. So I think there were references to some of the departments being over budget within the general fund. And so the adjustments were made internal to the general fund. I think that we would want to just keep an eye where department budgets are exceeded in the future, just to make sure that all of them don't exceed it, and then we have issues with the entire fund. But we do manage on that fund basis. And I too would just like to express my appreciation to administration, in particular Sam and her staff, for the work that went into this. And John, usually, I didn't get a call in June or July this year.
It's a good thing, right?
Unlike the last couple of years where we're nearing the deadline. If we don't have this done by the end of July, we lose
1% of state aid a day, yeah. It's
a
pretty significant.
a significant amount of money. And we were
Potentially
pushing,
$300,000.
pushing the limits the last couple of years relative to those deadlines. So it's good to see. I think that that's one of the benefits that we have in transitioning to our new system away from Kayenta. And I think we're looking for, as we go forward, better reporting and more consistent and more often reporting on our financial status for not only this committee, but for all of the standing committees going forward, which was part of the audit and the recommendations. But again, I didn't get that call. I assumed that things were going well. I know that we've had some issues in the past. They do call me, Baker Tilly calls me as the chair of the committee to ask that we identify any concerns we have going forward before they begin the audit. And we talked about some of those internal controls and other things. So there's been progress in those areas. And I think there is good communication that takes place between them and staff, and that was reflected in the audit itself. And again, Sam, thank you very much for the annual comprehensive financial review work, and I think that's still being tweaked, but we will bring that back at our next meeting for acceptance and filing. And if you see anything in there that needs a correction, please forward that to Sam, because she has a desire to get it right, and all of the time, not some of the time. And I think it just strengthens the document going forward. So anything?
Yeah, I would encourage anybody on the committee or the board, for that matter, to always reach out to us if they do have concerns or questions. We're always available.
So John, before you leave, I do have a question as it relates to, in the past year, we committed $8 million to Bug Tussle. I don't think when we did that, we envisioned its impact on our working capital fund and the KIP carryover, and we also drew down reserves relative to funding. From a high-level overview, are there any cautions that you would like to, as an auditor, give to us relative to our use of that fund balance going forward?
Yeah, I don't think the fund balance has been drawn down for the last several years, and you did add that capacity to commit those funds for Bug Tussle as well as towards the budget. I mean, you can see that how it was plotted out, so I think you're still in a good place. But if you set aside $10 million for the 25 budget and use 7 of it, obviously that's not sustainable from a long term. So it's something to keep your eye on, and you want to maintain a good fund balance level. And what good means is defined by the policy, and the policy the county has it's very old.
Well, we are in the process of updating it to 25 to 30%.
I think that's a good move.
So.
And Sam and I have talked about that as well. So I think the timing is great. The conditions have changed, as far as state funding and federal funds. There's a lot of changes going on there. So it's a good time to revisit it and see what makes sense for Marathon going forward.
So Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So John, just to follow up on that. So how impactful is deviating from your fund balance policy, and how does that impact your bond rating and potentially your bond rating on any borrowing that may occur by the board in the future?
Yeah, I was a little cautious because I'm not a financial advisor. It's not my role, but I do know they look at fund balance levels, especially if you have a policy. They're going to see how you're adhering to that over time, as well as a lot of other external factors. So I guess my one advice to that is you revisiting those policies. I've seen a lot of variety. I would shoot for a range, because I think with range, it gives you more flexibility. And then what do you do if you go over? Does that get appropriated towards capital, or does it reduce a levy, or what happens? That's what GFOA recommends as well, kind of those what-if situations. But generally, I see a range that varies by about 10% between the max and min as far as what you want to try to achieve. Yeah, and if Moody's or somebody or Standard & Poor's is looking at your financials, and they see a well laid out policy and they see you're adhering to it, I mean, that shows good fiscal management, for sure. Yeah, and it will impact your bond rating.
But doesn't our policy basically carry that over into the capital fund? So
yeah.
we do have a policy for directing that excess. Other board members, I think, it's a very high level discussion and it focused in on the fund balance. Do you have any questions for others? Go ahead.
Thank you. I see we went over the general fund. Did you guys go through each one of the funds that we have for like highway department, the landfill? And
yep.
Is there something in the packet that I missed that highlights it? I'm assuming there is.
Yeah, it's throughout the rest of the financials. John's summary slides have primarily focused on the general fund, but if you look to the financials, they do go through in a great level of detail all of the proprietary funds throughout the county.
We do audit all the funds, yep. In your enterprise landfill highway, those are major funds, so the materiality we use is individualized, so it's much lower. And so we do look at lands at a lot of detail.
I think it might be beneficial if we took just a minute to walk through that page if we could.
I don't know if there's a particular page you want to look at.
Those pages, I guess it's pages.
Yeah, maybe the income statement for those. So what Lance has right here is the income statement for all the governmental funds, with the exception of that far right column, which are the non-major funds. That is your parks fund and one other, the opioid. Yep, those two, that's a new fund, and those are in the back of the statement. So those are the two that get combined, but as you can see, we've got all the other major funds here as far as where they ended for the year, the result. And if you go down just a little bit, you'll see the positive fund balance, starting with the 51 million for the general fund and just kind of working your way across each one. And if you go down a few more pages in here, we'll get to there we go, the two enterprise funds, so landfill and highway. And you can see landfill does not have any operating cash. And that's been the case for the last several years. There is some of the restricted cash. Now that's going to be changing, I think, going forward with the new flexibility allowed by DNR. So some of that restricted cash will probably flow up into the upper line right there. But the landfill fund, I believe, had a loss once again. So, paying attention to those user charges, and I know the county is doing that, is very critical. The highway fund has pretty sufficient funds. If you go down a little more, you can see, there's a couple components of what's called net position. That's the equity. The net investment in capital assets is just that. It's all the capital, less depreciation, less outstanding debt. But the unrestricted is really kind of the amount that's in equity that's more liquid or more available for operations. And again, you can see the negative 9.4 for the landfill. Okay, so that's why there's been a lot of focus on that one. $60 million though in the highway fund. And on the next page is the income statement for those same two funds. And then right after that is the cash flow statement. So you can see where the money kind of came in, it went out, and where they get their resources from. A lot going on in each one of these. And these funds, of course, are full accrual. So the capital is in there, depreciation. You've got pension liabilities in here, which are really just a paper entry, so to speak. A lot of other full accrual gap items that are flowing through these, just like a business. Versus your general fund and others are more near-term measurement or modified accrual, as we say. It's the way you budget too. Now that kind of addresses the question. Yeah.
So we will take this up for acceptance at our August 13th meeting. So if you have questions, if you could let Sam know in advance, and then we can determine whether or not Jonathan would need to be available for that meeting, or if she can answer those questions in advance. But I think the desire to complete the comprehensive financial review was why it was late in getting into the packet, and we appreciate those efforts going forward. Go ahead, Nick.
One thing to note in the highway fund is there was a change at the state on how they record capital repairs. They can no longer record them as an expenditure in the year, they have to capitalize them. So that means that if you have a $10,000 repair, you have to recognize that expenditure over a period of time. So it might be 5 years, so you have 2,000. That was a big change that happened in 2024. Just so when you look at that, if you see like a reduction in expenditures or something look a little different from last year, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, Wisconsin DOT has some different types of reporting that they require, and they're actually not GAAP, but because they are more compliance-based, there's an exception that we can make for GAAP, and so it's usually not material, but that's
Generally accepted
common in all
accounting
counties.
principles is GAAP for,
Sorry.
Nick, go ahead.
So I guess this is kind of just an in general question. Maybe this isn't the appropriate committee for. I know we're going through the audit right now, but just kind of a general assessment, you know, as I was kind of going through and thinking through ways to offset tax burden onto our constituents. So given Marathon County's current tax structure with the 5.5% combined sales tax, the 0.5% county, $25 annual wheel tax per vehicle, and with property taxes averaging effective rates around 1.6, can the county feasibly eliminate property taxes and resident sales taxes by increasing sales tax targets on tourism while exempting local residents? And then also, is it feasible and advisable to increase sales taxes applied to tourists, potentially via special tourism-related surcharges or fees to fully fund the county budget currently supported by property and local sales taxes paid by residents, thereby eliminating those taxes on residents?
As a policy discussion, and I don't know that the statutes would allow us to do that.
Yeah, short answer, no. Statutes don't allow counties to institute sales tax beyond the 0.5% you referenced. Unless, Sam, you know something else, or Mike.
No, my response was going to be no, I don't believe so. So I think you're correct.
And there's a uniformity clause of the Constitution that would get into preferential treatment based upon area of residence. So there are a number of issues relative to counties are creations of the state, and we can only do what the state allows us to do. And unlike municipalities or cities and villages with certain powers, they have home rule authority, so we're pretty much constrained by what the state will or authorizes us to do, and there are limitations within that. But the underlying question is what we're encouraging the committees to look at in the context of preparing for the next year's budget. And all the members of the board are members of standing committees, but you also have the ability to go to other committees. If you're concerned about infrastructure, please go to that committee. And as we talk about mandated services, level of services, how we fund them, et cetera, I would encourage you to do that over the next, between now and the end, the meetings in October, even into November, to provide that input. And we can look at alternative delivery systems, delivery levels, and potentially funding sources within the constraints of the state statutes. Go ahead.
As I look at the net position ending, so it says for the highway department, we have $70,557,242. Is that including assets, or is that what is in the fund balance itself? Thank you.
Sam, can you take that one?
Yeah, can you just confirm, are you looking at 66,523,000?
On page 82, where it says at the end of, on the bottom, there's net
Over there.
beginning
Scroll back
reinstated 64 million, and then the line below it, ending is 70 million.
So I can interject, and Sam, you can add on if you want. So that's 60-some million out of the 70. 55 of it, almost 56, is cash. Okay, and there's other receivables such as the levy or the taxes. But the capital is part of that invested in capital assets, net investment of capital assets. That's 9.5 at the bottom there. So that component of your equity is made up of your capital minus any outstanding debt, which there's no capital debt in the highway fund. So it is in large part cash. Yes.
We've drawn that down this year through the budget and through, I think, some of the transfers. But that might be worthwhile for a discussion, a separate discussion in the future, so. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much, John.
Yep. Thanks for
So,
having me.
Sam, did you want to then comment on where we are with the last year's audit and I know many of those issues we've addressed and.
And I do forgive me, I forgot my audit plan from last year. Thank you very much, John. Would you be okay if I brought that back to next committee, or do you just want me to give you an overall broad kind of overview of the enhancements that we've made in this year?
What do you do on the broad overview, and then if she wants to supplement it, I think in the context of the audit, there are always the management part and where they're flagging the internal controls, the cash on hand, how we're handling cash, et cetera. And what the committee had requested last year was that the finance director, Samantha, develop a plan and trying to address those. And she did that, and including providing additional information to the committee. Maybe we can save that for the next meeting where you can then bring it in.
I'll bring it into a memo format along with the fund balance memo, as we discussed last year as well.
If that's acceptable, and then we can share that with the entire board, they'll have it. And but again, I think we wanted to make sure that the audit wasn't something that only got placed on file if there were issues that were raised. We wanted to make sure we addressed it, and Sam's done a great job, and we're hoping that the whole issue of handling of cash goes away in the future, and reconciliation timelines, and a few other things that are in there. But if you would like to, we could bring that back at maybe is the next meeting timely?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Is that, okay, I'm seeing nods, so thank you. Anything else? If not, we will then move on to item 5A2. Consideration to direct administration to release a request for proposals regarding redevelopment of the UWSP Wasadorm, and this was a result of requests that were made by Vice Chair Marshall, as well as the concerns that were raised by the Extension Education Economic Development Committee during their more recent one. And I'll turn it over to Administrator Leonard.
Sure. You can take formal action to provide me that direction. I anticipate that. I've already started working on getting the RFP ready based on a conversation, again, that was had at the Extension Education Economic Development, and I anticipate that, as we discussed at your last meeting, that as I shared, I fully appreciate that in the interest of transparency, you may want to go that route. So I'm happy and ready to proceed should you ask me to do that.
So with that, are there any questions or discussion or motions? I see Vice Chair Marshall.
I make a motion that we direct administration to release the RFP related to the UWSP Wausau dormitory, including redevelopment of that facility or parcel of land. Thank you.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. All right, discussion regarding 2026 annual budget development and policy recommendations from the committee, including review of mandatory discretionary program document and discussion of rates and fees. This is a standing committee item for all committees. Anybody have any issues? I know that the clerk has been working on her fees. I don't know if you want to, is this timely for reporting or are you still a work in progress?
We're still somewhat a work in progress, but we will be raising our marriage license fees. Those haven't been raised or touched at all since 2012. So we will be increasing those, and we will be increasing a couple other things. Hopefully, we've got some other projects. We've got another fee that we haven't increased since 2001 that hopefully we're going to look at. So hopefully everything falls into place to get all those, and that should be a rather significant revenue generator for our office.
Supervisor or Vice Chair Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed that under the county clerk, you do have a per hour for municipalities unable to perform WIS vote duties. And just wondering if that hourly rate covers salary and any fringe benefits?
That is the hourly rate that is in our current MOU that we have with our municipalities, and I've been talking to Mike that we need to redo that starting for 2026 elections. So yes, that's going up as well.
So I think one of the things under the facilities discussion that's also part of the budget assumptions and part of the report later is that whole issue relative to energy costs and our utilization, both in terms of is it possible for us to decommission some buildings and transfer some buildings, as well as are we taking all appropriate action relative to maximizing focus on energy and other dollars in a cost savings method and reducing our consumption of both kilowatts and therms. So I think Chris will be talking about that a little bit later. Are there other items for us? I think some of our rates are set by statutes with the register of deeds and some of the other departments, and so we're limited to the constraints. Again, that's where the state comes in and restricts our, or doesn't restrict it, it specifies what we can charge for certain services. Other items? Anything relative to levels of services, we're pretty consistent with what the requirements of the state law are. So there is the Corporation Council. If you stand up, you get noticed. Anything else? If not, we'll continue to carry that over. We'll move on to then consideration of applications for room dedication in connection with the Forensic Science Center. Administrator Leonard or Chris, I'm not sure.
I'll kick it off and happy to answer any questions, but big thank you to Sarah for putting together the draft documents and a lot of work in this regard. So as directed by the board, staff really did a lot of work relative to seeking outside funding for this project. And in connection with that, similar to what the situation had been previously with the warm water therapy pool on the Lakeview campus, we were fortunate enough to have a significant amount of donations and have a donor recognition plan in place. Here on page 289 of your packet, there's a resolution. Your current policy that was adopted by the board a number of years ago does create, and then this was in 2016, does create the opportunity for large donors to be recognized within the facility based on signage that would exist. And for this project, we have a donation from the BA and Esther Greenheck Foundation, was a $1 million award. And then North Central Technical College, as you know, has been a strong partner in identifying a location for the project. And all told, their contribution is approximately $600,000 to that project based on the reinvestment of the land purchase price and also some additional facility furnishings and a cash contribution toward the purchase of a very impressive X-ray machine if you take the tour. So consistent with that policy, again, is a resolution in your packet calling for for signage to recognize those two donations. The observation deck within the Forensic Science Center would have signage recognizing BA and Esther Greenheck Foundation, and then signage adjacent to one of the primary conference room or training room would recognize North Central Technical College. So happy to answer any questions. In terms of process, it's on your agenda. Your naming policy allows this committee to make the final determination should you wish. It also allows you to forward the consideration to the full board should you wish to do that based on, again, your existing policy. I would tell you that the grand opening for the Forensic Science Center is forthcoming, so we would need action certainly by your meeting this evening, but it is on your county board meeting this evening as well, should you wish to forward it to the county board for consideration. Anything I missed, Sarah?
Administrator and I spoke earlier, and I think just under the guise of transparency, I think it would be worthwhile for us to advance it, take action, and if we are in support, to advance it to the full board for their consideration. So what are any questions relative to the policy or the naming? If not, what are your wishes? This is where a motion would be good. Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to approve the recognition of the donors, BA Esther Greenheck Foundation and the North Central Technical College, and move to the full board for its consideration.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. 5B1, consideration of 2026 budget assumptions and priorities. This is a carryover from the discussion we had at the last meeting, as well as the presentation that we had to the county board. There are still assumptions that are in there, and we've had some discussions relative to, maybe I'll take the lead on the wages and just because we still are in the process of evaluating where we stand relative to the market. One of the things that we could put in there is market conditions, and we would at a later date look at what that means. Are we at the 50th percentile, 55th, 60th? How does that stack up relative to others? But we would want to drive it off of market condition because that's what really impacts our ability to recruit and retain staff. And then you want to talk about shared revenue and
Sure.
the others?
So I made some changes based on my conversation with Chair Robinson and your discussion at this committee and the brief discussion at the full board. Just to highlight a couple of areas, the shared revenue portion, again, highlighting the change, and we're waiting for, as denoted by the 3 asterisks and the explanation below, that we're waiting to see really what that means in terms of a reduction and what that correlates to in terms of a dollar amount. So just highlighting that for a budget assumption, as I shared at the full board and at this committee. Certainly the opportunity to revise those things. The chair referenced the wage study, which is the expenditure assumption at the bottom. Of course, you are the body, and the full board is going to be the body that ultimately gives us the direction relative to that study and the amount that we will budget. So it's not as though that market dollar amount is something that staff will put together. We will put together the policy questions to frame them for you, then you will provide those answers, and that will drive that number. But noting that through the highlight, that would mirror the public charges revenue assumption at the top. Once we know what that number is, I can provide direction, should you wish me to do so, to department heads to really have that be the underlying assumption for their increases for the public services that we offer, where we do charge fees that are not constrained by statute. And then lastly, I highlighted the other insurance portion, where based on your conversation, you had questions relative to the opportunities to control that number. Again, that number was based on the information we had from our broker relative to the market. There was a question, I believe, from Vice Chair Marshall about holding costs. It was a very good question because apparently I had asked that of Jamie back in May, and she had a memo that I included in the packet on page 218. Short review, and when I looked at that, is there opportunity to change our insurance approach relative to buildings that are not occupied? You'll see from that memo, again, on page 218, significant risk to not insure those, and really the cost to insure those buildings isn't all that substantial. You're talking really a couple $1,000s. You'll see the costs in there. But ultimately, as Jamie shared at our last meeting, our plan is to work with our property insurer to manage those increases, to keep those reasonable. But again, as we start the budgeting process, that's what our broker provided us relative to the market, what they're seeing in terms of overall increases for those forms of insurance. But overall, happy to answer any questions. This is a working document.
So I know that with traditional insurance, you have to be insured to either 80 or 90% of replacement costs in order to not void your coverage. Do we have any corresponding requirements for the county with, where we've got a hybrid of a system with limits, but are we required to be at replacement value for valuing insurance for premium calculations?
Are you talking about the vacant properties, or?
I'm sorry, are we talking about
Are you asking about the vacant properties, or are you talking?
well, about all properties, but in particular the vacant properties, because you've got the vacant properties, but do we, let's say that we had a fire at one of those facilities, obviously we wouldn't rebuild it, but would we potentially void any coverage by not being within X percent of replacement costs?
Well, that would be up to the committee on how you would want to insure those properties. In the memo, you can do a specific limit if you would want to, if you don't want to rebuild those properties. It is cheaper to insure that way. However, there is that significant risk that Lance mentioned. If something happens, and it is only insured at a specific amount, you have to be absolutely 100% positively sure that you are not going to rebuild there. And it basically just covers the cost to demolish further and, grade the area and remove whatever else is there so that you can, have the land and resell the land. So basically, you have to be pretty sure that you're not going to rebuild there.
So is the VP then is basically a demolition, lower level of insurance? I think one of the things we were also looking for is, are there carrying costs beyond just the insurance relative to heating, cooling at those buildings, basic electrical? And Chris, I don't know if you had a chance to look at that?
Sorry, I was looking at something. What was your question?
Relative to the vacant properties that are identified or soon to be vacant properties on page 218.
Yeah, I included that in my report. I can certainly share that now if you'd like.
Well, we can do it any time. It's part of the,
Sure. I mean, I can get into any detail you want. I had calculated the holding costs on utilities for water, gas, and electric for the vacant buildings. I included the facility on 811 North 3rd, which is currently at auction, just to give you an idea of where we're at. And I had to extrapolate a little bit for the River Drive properties. But in total, those properties annually were just shy of $60,000 a year we pay in utilities for holding them and maintaining sort of the minimum environment you need to maintain to avoid other issues.
okay. So Administrator Leonard, as it relates to, if we could go back to the budget assumptions, so we continue to list the budget assumption for other insurance. Are you suggesting we modify that at all?
I guess that's really your prerogative. Again, that's the information we got from our broker. I have all the confidence in the world. Jamie will work with our insurer and we'll be able to modify that number. I don't know, Jamie, if there's any explanation you want to provide with how that's likely to change, if at all.
So it's my understanding that they will try to decrease the rate at which the insurance is charged per $1,000 of insurance. So I haven't been able to connect with our insurance provider or our insurance representative through MPIC to determine what that rate would be. And it's probably too early for him to give me that number. It's usually determined about October or November of the year. So that's about when I usually get the policy renewal proposal. But that's what Robertson and Ryan had told me they will try to do so that the impact of our insurance premium isn't as significant based on the appraisal and the increases that they had provided us earlier this month or June, whenever that came through.
So I guess your options, if you want to have us put a lower number in there, we certainly can do that with the understanding that in the unforeseen event that we get one of those, we aren't able to do that, we can come back and we can make changes late in the budget process, similar to what we have, as Chair Robinson mentioned in previous meetings with things like GTA. As we get the best number, we'll come back. If we don't get a number until the budget is finalized, that we can't truly get a handle on what that renewal is, we'll just deal with it during the year. I mean, I know $100,000 is a fair amount of money, but we'll figure it out. We can also figure it out utilizing your contingency post budget adoption. So at the end of the day, if you want to put 50,000 in there, that's fine with me. It's a placeholder to start.
Vice Chair Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question on the expenditure assumptions for health insurance at 6.5%. Is that with an using the existing parameters and existing contributions from employees. I noticed that you had put a 3, which means modify benefits to reduce costs or increase premiums. So it's a 6.5%, like the standard, and you're hoping to lower that through,
6.5% is what we would budget, put in the budget for building the budget. If to get to that point, we need to, if funds are insufficient throughout other areas of the budget, the reason I ranked it as a 3 in terms of priorities was because I think the other 2 are higher. I mean, the compensation relative to the market study and implementing that, I don't think I can adequately put into words how important I think that is. So that's why I had that ranked higher. Certainly, if our costs for health insurance were such that it requires modification to get to a 6.5%, that's going to be, based on my prioritization, a joint exercise to control that cost. I don't think we quite honestly don't have the levy or other resources to do that without it being a situation where we're modifying benefits and or increasing costs to staff.
I know that the health insurance is part of compensation. In most people's mind, that's just one part of the compensation. I would like to see that estimate number lower than 6.5%. I don't think we're willing to raise our rates based on that market study plus additional 6.5% of health insurance. I guess I don't see how we can do that in the future.
Chair Gibbs.
I think one of the challenges that we're seeing, though, is the health industry, and the cost in the health industry is even higher than the 6.5. From a national standpoint, I think it's closer to 10, as we've seen even in our neighboring counties. The Portage County was 20+% increase. So I think a 6.5 at this point, just in preliminary numbers, we'll obviously know what the market study is on the wage compensation, but I think it's a starting point, but I don't know that it's the ending point.
Vice Chair Marshall.
I do know that one of the provisions that you have, I believe, is a 90% coinsurance, meaning when the bill comes in, the county pays 90% and the employee pays 10%. I'm not aware of anyone that has that high of level coinsurance. So I do think we need to look at the provisions in the plan to bring that cost down.
So what are your wishes? Are we going to, I think we'll deal with, do we want to deal with them together, budget assumptions and priorities, or separately? They're
Separately would be better.
separately? All right, we're on assumptions. We have the ability to tweak that page. What are your wishes? I would just express some concern over lowering the 6.5% too low, given the fact that we want to be competitive. Ultimately, the drivers on what we can do will be our net new construction and what our revenue streams are coming in, whether the fees and permits and et cetera, we'll do it. And if we can't, we'll have to make some cuts. And that's where the direction to the administrator is relative to plan design and plan cost and what is the county share versus the employee share come in. But I think the long-term goal is to move us in the direction of self-insurance, where we've got potentially some more control over some of the factors, but that's a longer-term process. I know Vice Chair Marshall's been very supportive of that, and we've taken steps relative to the on-site clinic to try to hold down some of those costs, which been why we're not looking at the 20, I think 22% Portage County is looking at. Whatever, but I think we're going to have to look at the whole compensation package in terms of wages, benefits, and if we get into the discussion on the holiday as well. And the net impact to the county, because we don't have unlimited resources at the end of the day. We're really driven by how sales tax going up, where shared revenue, and where our ancillary fees and what will the net new construction yield. Any thoughts? Do you want to, are you comfortable with leaving the insurance at the level it is and trying to work to reduce that? Do we want to hear from Chris? We don't have any numbers in for utility costs. We've got an X in there. I think we need to fill that X. And maybe this is a good time for you to, if we can deviate for the purpose of clarity from the agenda and ask Chris to give us an update, his update.
Did you just want me to focus on where we're at with utilities at this point?
Yes.
Okay. All right, sorry. So the available utility rates that I have to date, and some of it's ongoing, and you'll hear in a minute as to why, but for water bills, contacting the city is the easiest of all the discussions in the sense that I can reach out to them and they discuss those at their level, at their committee level at Public Works, and there's no planned rate increases for 26. So the water rates will stay the same as they are, so that part of that budget can remain static. And the only caveat there, which is a positive one, is that with the chiller at the library going in, the library's water bill, which is astronomical in the past, will go down, but I won't know the change in that until November because they bill in a staggered quarter system. So beginning of November, I'll be able to have a direct comparison in terms of what the change to the positive is. The gas from WPS conversation. So for WPS, we get gas for them. So I guess real short, gas comes to us from Chicago to Wausau, and then WPS charges us from the city gate in Wausau to our meters. That percentage increase, when you look at their broad PSC filings, is going to be approximately 5%. It's overall, as a portion of the gas cost is smaller, but I'm looking to get a very specific read on that, and you'll hear more. Well, I'll jump to electric. So I've been working with WPS a lot this year, so I leveraged those relationships to get information from them, which I had tried to get before, but was hard to get because a lot of the information you get on your bill is not what you see in the PSC filings and is not what's covered in the press in terms of what the average homeowner can expect in case of a rate. So what we have is 58 accounts, and within those accounts are 10 different rate schedules. So I'm working with the account manager to get specific percentage increases on each of those rate schedules and apply them to the accounts, and that will get you back to an overall percentage. Now, those are ranging from 3 to 8% in terms of increases for 26. But when you apply that to the amount charged to each account, that's going to have somewhere in between. And that's what I'm working with him on now, is to get that sort of overall percentage. And I've got all the information, but so I'm mostly wanting him to confirm my math and my understanding, because really it's that disconnect between what you see as the consumer and what they use in their own sort of WPS language to talk about tariff rates and schedules and all this. But suffice it to say, you're in the 5% range there. For the gas that we get via Constellation, as we work with, they charge us for moving the gas from Chicago to Wausau. And what that is a combination of really three different things. There's the market price, which is the New York Mercantile Exchange, or NYMEX, plus the basis, and basis is the transport cost, and then the handling that Constellation charges for their services. So right now, what I try to do is is hedge and be conservative and reduce risk because it's a very volatile market. Right now, our rates are locked in through the end of October. So what I'm working with our contact there is to forward contract market pricing currently is 5 to 9% higher than where we're at. But that depends on how far out you go. So in a typical year, if you're looking at a forward contract, the further you go, the more uncertainty there is. So the market generally charges you more. But the market currently is backward dated, which means that's flipped on its head. So if you look out 4 years, it's actually cheaper than 1 year. So I've been discussing a 50% volume hedge with them, which is just saying that you would lock in 50% of your volume, all of your basis, which is the transport costs that can really spike in shortages. And you're seeing more of those with a pipeline failure, or if there's a supply restriction for really cold winter days, things like that, you get notices that you have to nominate how much gas you're going to use each month. But nevertheless, locking that in for the year keeps that from spiking. So that's helping to mitigate risk. If we were to go forward contracting out 4 years, locking in that 50% volume, that's a 5% increase. Now, the impacts to the market, and this is the most volatile part of our utility portfolio, is that the United States, it's important for you to know this, so I'll try to be brief, but the United States went from being a pretty much no player in a global market in natural gas to being the global leader in gas exports in the last less than 10 years. And what you're seeing is more facilities, more refineries, more pipelines, more transport coming online. So what you're seeing is much more exporting of domestic supply out of the country. So that puts a pressure on domestic supply for users like us. And as those exports increase, then there's a push and pull between what's available for everybody domestically, because to be frank, Europe and Asia are paying 3 or 4 times more than we do through the export market. So you've got increasing exports, you've got AI data centers, which is another huge thing coming on, where the demand for energy from them is significant. And natural gas is one of the areas that they're really tapping into. So, and I know there's AI data centers that have been contemplated in Wisconsin, but really if it happens anywhere, it really crimps the supply, because the only gas available to us is what's available in the current infrastructure and pipelines. So there's not a lot of room within the pipe to add more. So that as more demand comes onto what's available, the price goes up. There's also geopolitics, of course. If something happens in the Middle East, or even when we saw with the Ukraine war, prices can spike dramatically. Then, of course, from the production side, it's really, you're seeing less rig count in general, so meaning that producers are drilling a little bit less because they need a market price to make that return worth doing the drilling for them. So if they're reducing rig count, then that means, again, less supply side. And so there's a little bit of fluctuation there. And you have natural gas wells that are specifically for natural gas, so you'd hear that as dry production, and then there's natural gas associated with oil production, so that would be a wet production. Then, of course, every year, or it seems like every year, you have refinery maintenance. When those shut down, that affects supply because now things aren't being processed. Weather assumptions versus realities. As you know, the weather has been volatile or unpredictable in cases, so that will affect it, because this heat wave we're going to go through now in the Midwest on the East Coast is going to spike prices in the next week, 2 weeks. And that's really every week, 2 weeks, the market is shifting constantly, which is why I'm saying I'm trying to put together that strategy to reduce risk. Headlines also, unfortunately, can have an impact, but that all being sort of the negative stuff, you could also have a warm winter and that will cut the market price in half. So without the crystal ball, that's where you're looking at, okay, if we just say everybody who's looking at fundamentals now and looking ahead, you'd say you're in that 5 to 9% increase, depending on how far out you want to forward contract some of your volumes. And we can, and that's what I'm working on now, is like, what's the most risk we can mitigate, but still leave enough volume to capture an opportunity should it arise. Then storage, so national storage rates, they're still above the 5-year average, but when these weather events happen and power draws really start spiking, that drops down. And so then that plays back into the production side, but I said I was going to be brief, but suffice it to say, it's a volatile market. So I would say for gas, a 5% would be like the low end hedge in terms of looking at increases. But the market price was probably going to stay within that $3 to $5 range on the NYMEX market. And if we can lock in basis and half of our volume, then that will help take advantage of where prices are now, ensure you get a 5% increase versus a 10%. And then if things happen down the line, you can say, okay, we're gonna get a lot of savings, not savings per se, but we're going to not lose by locking in volumes when prices drop down. So generally speaking, it's 5% as a conservative guess, not educated guess, with more detail to come specifically on the electric accounts. But if you have questions about any of that, I'm happy to answer them. But like I said, it's important for you to know some of the things that play into it, especially the gas market, because it's very straightforward. So when it comes to utilities, I love talking in the city because it's a 30-second conversation versus everyone else.
Chris, one of the concerns that I have is that, and you didn't address it, is where are we relative to our reduction of use of therms and kilowatts? And I think that's where we've got the ability to do it through energy efficiency and other things. And I think that's what we're driving for. So we've got buildings we're not using. We have opportunity to access, focus on energy. How can we apply energy savings associated with increased efficiencies, decreased operating costs and other things to hold the line on utilities? Because we don't have unlimited dollars for utilities or health insurance or other things. So what are we doing to drive down our utilization of energy in our buildings?
Excellent segue. So I'll say the wild card in the utilities conversation is the Forensic Science Center, because it's just coming online now. So we won't know what that's going to do as far as adding to the bill per se. But if you were to sell, if we were able to move away from the buildings that are vacant, then that would get you a $60,000 reduction in annual costs. We're chipping away at it with the buildings that we are selling, so that will help. That will help offset any increase from the morgue. As far as focus on energy, we work with them on everything that is available. And so even today, I just got a survey from WPS, like, how was your recent conversation with your FOE guy? So whether it's equipment or an approach, we are on a first name basis with that individual. You have a regional rep. And so focus on energy plays a part in any project we're doing. For the county energy policy, anybody's regulated in terms of a range of temperatures you're allowed to set for occupancy. There's some variations with that when it comes to jails or nursing homes, some 24/7 operations, but everywhere else we're setting minimum set points, so at the lowest possible setting. And I'm going to go through a laundry list so that sorry for taking your time, but again, this is to answer your question thoroughly. The new construction and remodel buildings, which is most of them at this point, all have lighting control programs, which allows us to schedule when and where lights are in use. We recently reduced the brightness of the lights by 10%, and nobody said anything, so we could ratchet it down another 5%, 10% to see what happens. But again, this is, to your point, we're looking at how you can minimize the use. We're moving the moving from fluorescent tubes to LED upgrades. That's continuing. We've got sufficient funds in the Department of Energy grant to continue that work. We've got all of our pumps and fans use variable frequency drives that slow pumps down. So that slows down how much energy they use and the wear and tear on the actual equipment itself, which buys you life expectancy. If buildings are unoccupied, fans go into the unoccupied mode. So you're really only running when temperatures get too high in the summer. Now, sometimes people come in Monday morning and say it's super hot in here, but that's because all weekend it's been at the hottest it can be in the building until a few hours before people come to work. We have all of our heating boilers are run on outside air reset programs, so that we're only heating water to the needed temp to heat the building. We reclaim energy through heat wheels and heat exchangers in the equipment. So part of the HVAC system is you have to release energy you've spent to cool or heat the building into into the environment. So when we do that, we have equipment in place that captures it and reduces the amount you then have to cool or heat on the other side of it. So those things are relatively inexpensive compared to other equipment, but they have a really quick rate of return on investment because you're able to capture the energy you've already spent and minimize the amount you have to use to again, heat the new air or cool the new air. We have everything on schedules. Everything has occupancy sensors. So if a building or office is empty, things turn off. The air handlers will automatically adjust their start and stop times to account for outdoor air temperature. The old methods would have been running that equipment continuously. And so the new equipment really is smarter in the sense of saying, what do I really need to do what I'm being asked to do? And so that's all programmed largely through the building automated control systems. We have heating water temp resets relative to the outdoor air temperature, so you can adjust the temperature set point of heating water based on what the temperature is outside. So really you're making the machine work only as hard as it has to based on the outside temps. That includes using optimizers in the sense that you can, like at night, for instance, you can cool with outside air versus mechanically cooling. So you turn off the chiller, let the outdoor air cool instead of the machine, and that saves on electricity as well. Same thing with variable flow rates on the water pumps, so it's not constantly pushing and using energy it doesn't have to use, so the pump speeds vary to save on the pump energy. The supplemental heat, so what we'll do is we'll use more efficient forms of heat to supplement, like along the windows there. So you can use heat along the windows up to a certain temperature point, and that's more efficient than asking the building to heat up that energy loss. And so by supplementing that, you're asking the building to do less. We have variable air volume in place, so that utilizes VAV boxes. VAV boxes, especially in new construction, whereas maybe in the past you'd have one controller for the entire floor, now you might have 80 VAV boxes, which are controlling each individual room or two rooms, so that really if nobody's in there, the whole building isn't trying to heat or cool that space. It's really going to be only based on who's in the space, if somebody's in there. Same thing, I already mentioned variable frequency drives, but that again is for your fan and pump motors. I mentioned the energy recovery wheels, runaround loops, and heat exchangers already, but that does recover a lot of energy. We have the high efficiency and high turndown rates on boilers and chillers. So what that basically means is they run at much lower rates for percentage output than older equipment. So they're far more efficient, which saves on energy. The water-cooled chillers, all of our large campuses use water-cooled chillers. They're far more efficient than air-cooled chillers. We do our boiler tuning, coil cleaning, all the things you want to do preventive maintenance-wise to make sure that all the efficiency you've gained by investing in that new equipment are realized. Gosh, I lost my train of thought there. But essentially, everywhere we have been investing in the infrastructure, those are going to realize savings. The problem in interpreting it sometimes is that the rate will go up and kind of hide some of the savings, but it's also in that you're trying to establish a baseline. So like for 1100 Lakeview, that was just recently completed. So we really only have 3 months of information in terms of what is the actual energy use there now that people are moved out of River Drive. We have a year's worth of data on the other buildings. So now you're getting to a point where you're going to be able to understand data-wise what your usage is and then identify other areas and other things. Setting minimum temps will help. People might complain a little bit, but at the same time, some people are hotter and colder, so we can just sticking to the minimums will remove the 2 to 3 degree flexibility you might have in a space with a thermostat on the wall. The other thing, we had Johnson Controls come through a year and a half ago to do building audits to look for problems that they thought they might be able to solve, and they couldn't find any of the things that they would typically be looking for. So they were a little bit frustrated. We were a little bit proud. But moving beyond that, we're now in a program with WPS and Focus on Energy, and a component of that will be getting a WPS to come in and do an energy audit just on the usage. And it's good to work with them because it's a huge company, it's like I said earlier, it can be difficult sometimes to get information and that you're trying to answer these questions with. But those building audits are going to be specifically focused on the energy usage, and they already have all of our bill history, all of our usage, all that. So that, when that work product is done, John Mason, our maintenance supervisor, he just started this, well, not just, but recently. So when that work product is available, I'll certainly bring it forward. Overall, there's still things that need to be addressed. We still have some older equipment here and there, you know, looking at the 5-year plan. But as a whole, the county's in a much better spot in terms of, the equipment that you would look to save on energy in terms of how efficient can you get. There's bits and pieces through my reports, so I'm sorry for hop skipping around here, but I'll stop there. But I've got a longer list, but I can put that into a memo and bring it, or put it in the packet for your next meeting so that you can have it in front of you as well, instead of just hear me read through it. There's other things that we do to minimize water use for the custodians, and things like that.
So do you know the relative value? So you said water rates are going to be probably stable. So what is that percentage of our overall utility rates?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll include that in that memo I just mentioned.
So in natural gas, you're looking at that 5 to 9. Electric, are you looking at?
Electric, it'll vary by the meter, but I'm getting down to each individual account and rate schedule versus what you tend to see is like they requested a 9% increase at PSC, and then PSC gives them an 8.5. That doesn't really tell us what we need to know. So now that I have the information saying, here are the 10 different rate schedules, apply them across the 58 accounts, here's what I've done, did I do it right? So our account manager at WPS has that information. I'm just waiting to hear back from him. But so I'll have a much more precise number there. But the individual rate schedules are increasing anywhere from 3 to 8.8%. But that will play into how much volume, I think, to your other point.
Go ahead. We welcome guidance if you have some.
We were talking about the budget. With the health insurance, we were talking about keep retaining employees. I'm sorry, just something that was on my mind. With retaining employees, what kind of health benefits do we offer? And do most of your employees take family coverage, or are they individual and their spouse is taking family coverage with the kids? Because that is a big selling point, is your health insurance. And if it is better than the local area, that is something that'll get people to stay. But I was just curious what our rates are at compared to the area. If we are at 90/10 and premiums, I'm just getting an idea if this is something that'll draw people in.
Sure, I don't have the data on utilization for what percentage take family or single. We can get that. We budget based on actual experience within departments, what they take. Our current plan is 85-15 with a 5% reduction for the individuals that participate in the wellness program to get to that 90/10. That wellness program is aimed at essentially ensuring people do the things that decrease their overall healthcare costs, like preventative care and required screens based on age. But I can see if we can pull from our system what the breakdown is for utilization by department, whether it's family plan, single, or they don't enroll. Relative to, other counties are having similar conversations. I was on a call on Monday, and there are counties that have 0 deductible for staff. And of course, we're not there. We used to. If you're looking for some great reading, you can go to the budget document, and it talks about our history going back 20 years relative to health insurance and the split and the costs of the plans. But I can certainly see if I can find that information relative to the breakdown.
What is the maximum out of pocket for an individual or family? Do you know?
That also is in that document.
Okay.
Relative, I can pull it up, but if you look in the budget, and it has a whole series of pages on health insurance benefit, and it has the out-of-pocket and deductible amounts.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we could go back to utilities for a second. You mentioned a lot of the volatility. At what point do we start looking at investing in our resiliency through things like rooftop solar or other technologies that might help us in the long run?
Well, any new construction, we look at options for that and returns on investment. We looked more at sort of ground source heat pumps with the morgue, and the engineers didn't think that the ROI was going to be there. But for like the highway facility, we would certainly ask the designers, like, what would it take to mount a 20 kW or 100 kW system? I think if you look at the county as a whole and there was a desire to move in that direction, you try to identify just the best location and then offset, well, best location tied with your highest use because you're restricted to net metering. So you want to try to account for offsetting your energy use with a solar array to the maximum potential value, because once you get past how much you're actually using, the return goes down dramatically. So it's not really, and that's WPS. There's different schemes with different utility providers. I think, the short answer would be, it's easy for me to say, bring designs and ideas back and say, and as a suggestion, or recommend, not even a recommendation, but here's what it would look like for conversation's sake. But it would really be a matter of saying, okay, what if there was a direction to do that? I would say you'd want to look at offsetting users like the jail or North Central Healthcare, where they're the highest users. So that's going to be your maximum opportunity for benefit, and then calculate what the ROI would be on that. And there's lots of different thoughts and opinions on what that means, but you can show the math, show the numbers, and then have a discussion from there. I think even without any other programs in place, you can demonstrate what the ROI would look like. And then even for, say again, back for the highway facility, there might be additional reasons the committee or board would want to look at something there for like emergency operations, or if we had we get derechos go through or something like that, you're going to have highway crews go out. So then you could say, well, we'd like to do resiliency for all of the computer and associated like operations components. What's the actual energy draw for those? Then right size whatever the project would look like for that type of resiliency, and then conduct the same calculations and say, this is what the upfront investment would be. This is how many years it takes for the return on investment. This is the drop down in efficiency for the project after 15, 20, 25 years. And then even after it's, past its optimum, what does this 70% efficient system look like down the road? So that information is all out there. I'm happy to bring it to the committee for conversation. I know we've discussed this in the past. So anytime you would like me to, I'm happy to do it.
All right, so Supervisor Lemmer.
Perhaps I'm in the minority, but I would welcome that presentation.
All right, so we need to put some numbers in, and the question is, do we modify some other numbers? So utility costs, so a $60,000 savings from the sale of the buildings would offset how much of an increase in other?
Good question. The other issue I think is trying to figure out what's the footprint of the Forensic Science Center going to be. I've only had the construction bills for that, so those aren't really a true sense of operations, but we can extrapolate from that pretty soon. But I can look at the 60%, unrealized potential. So if that were to come to pass, then what would the $60,000, offset on the overall in terms of gas, water, and electric? Because I have those rates for each of the facilities. I combine them all for this meeting, but I can take the proportion off the overall and then apply that back to the proportion you were asking for earlier.
All right, we need to put a number in there. Is it 0? Is it 2?
Can I offer, maybe to Chris's point, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Mr. Chair, but really, again, the purpose of this is to guide budget formation, and if the goal is to adopt that approach, that it be guided by the math Chris just laid out, that we take, all right, let's assume we're gonna have a decrease in footprint of the River Drive buildings and Thomas Street. The best information I have on Thomas Street right now is that if all goes well, spring, and we can start on the RFPs for those divestment opportunities, but if nothing else, we shut them down middle of the year, easy math, right? And then we be guided by Chris's math that he just alluded to in terms of adding on the Forensic Science Center. That's enough guidance. I don't know what that number is going to be, Mr. Chair, but I don't think Chris does right now, but I think we can get that as part of our budget preparation. So perhaps rather than a number, I can add some text to capture that, if that's what you want. Otherwise, if you want to put a number in, certainly we can do that. That's the
Chair
blunt
Gibbs.
instrument.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking at all of these, obviously, there's always adjustments that are made throughout the year. And the divestment of those properties on Thomas Street and River Drive obviously will contribute at some point. When that is, we don't know. But for budget assumptions, if we were to put in a 5% increase with the target of, obviously, as the facilities management director has alluded to, minimizing as much as possible risk along with the opportunities that they continue to explore with the utility reductions. I think I would suggest that we use a 5% just for building costs, for building at this point, knowing that we're going to try to minimize that even further.
Is that a motion?
That was a motion.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lemmer. Any discussion on putting 5% in for the utility cost? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. Other adjustments, Vice Chair Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I look at our revenue assumptions, we have a 1% increase in sales tax, 1.75 in levy increase for net new construction, 3.4% is our best guess for shared revenue. I don't know how we can afford a 6.5% health insurance increase. I propose that we change that estimate to the maximum of our estimates, which is 3.4% of an increase. And that's a motion.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion on the motion? Chair Gibbs.
The one caution that I have for the committee is looking at, without having a total understanding of our market and our salary and our benefits, they're all, I think, wrapped in one. And so moving that to a 3.4% really becomes challenging when defining the value that our employees have. So I wouldn't be in favor of moving that to moving from 6.5, at least on a budget assumption. Obviously, we know, and the administrator knows, that we have obviously a finite number of new resources that are available. But making that change now, I think, is premature.
Any other discussion? Vice Chair Marshall.
Last month, we looked at holidays on a one-off basis and said, you know what, we don't have enough holidays. We did not look at benefits as a comprehensive plan at that time. And while I'm not opposed to looking at that, I think we do need to be realistic as to what our revenue sources are. And we have the cost of excessive health insurance increases in every year since I believe it was 2011 when the change was made. So I stand by increase it only 3.4%. Thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? No.
No.
My count is 3-4. If you want a roll call, we can do a roll call, or that motion fails. What do you want? What are your wishes relative to the assumptions as a whole? Chair Gibbs.
Make a motion to approve the now defined budget assumptions to the full board for its consideration.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Lemmer. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no? That motion carries, but is not unanimous. Now we'll deal with the issue of budget priorities. I know that Supervisor Poole has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, related to what I was talking about at our last meeting with the cost of living and affordability continue to be major issues with most people in the county. I think keeping the tax burden low and working to keep our property tax levy as close as possible to last year.
Is your mic on?
Yeah, it is.
It is, okay.
Okay, sorry, but trying to keep our property tax levy as close as possible to last year should be front of our minds as we work our way through the budget process. So to that end, I would like to offer an amendment to this resolution to help emphasize this more. Should I go through it and let you know the changes I have in mind?
Sure, if it would be timely.
Okay. In the resolution, in the fifth whereas clause, at the last sentence says sustainable tax levy rate. I would like that changed to sustainable tax levy and tax levy rate. And then into the first now therefore be resolved clause, number 5, operating expenses. It ends services and programs, period. I would like to change that to services and programs, comma, and add, while also seeking to maximize use of non-levy revenue streams to assist in maintaining a sustainable tax levy and levy rate.
Right, is there a second? Second by Vice Chair Marshall. Any discussion?
I need to get that from him at some point, because my fingers didn't keep up.
All right, so okay, I think Administrator Leonard has pulled it up. Does that reflect your motion?
Pardon?
Yeah, I can't see that.
Up here, it's way bigger.
Oh, yeah.
So there are two amendments, the whereas, the fifth whereas would insert in tax levy right at the end before rate. And the second amendment would be dealing with under the now, first now therefore be it resolved number 5.
That is correct.
While seeking to maximize use of non-levy revenue streams to assist in maintaining a sustainable tax levy and levy rate. Any discussion on that motion? Supervisor Lemmer.
Can you talk a little bit about the ramifications of those, both practically from the administrator's point of view, but also clarify these non-levy revenues that you're referring to?
From my point of view, as I said, I think we also, this is important, I think, to the public to let them know that we're keeping in mind, keeping the tax burden as low as possible on them. I want to communicate that more clearly through this document. I didn't think there was enough information down.
Well, no, what specifically is the non-revenue that you're talking,
It's broad
non-levy
there.
revenue?
I think any opportunities we can find for that.
An example, for instance, are you talking the user fees?
It could be, if there is the opportunity for that. I mean, there's certainly talk about the fees reflecting the true cost of it, moving to that instead of being subsidized through the levy, so that could be something as well.
So my presentation to all of the standing committees is that we've got a $200 million budget, 55 million-ish, 57 comes from tax levy. If you don't increase your fees in your permits, you've basically created internal pressure to reduce or cut the programs otherwise. I think this effort is to make sure that we are maximizing the efforts on the non-levy streams to have a sustainable levy rate going forward. And the rate would be both the levy and the mill rate. And Supervisor Poole.
Yeah, and just strategically too, I think we want to do what we can to take pressure off the levy. There's so much uncertainty out there. I think that's a good policy and a good strategy to look for, to do that when opportunities we can.
You asked a question on administration. In terms of direction, is this anything kind of outside of our normal discussion? I don't think it's fundamentally different. I think it does there's more emphasis and what non-levy revenue streams mean for our team is everything that literally is not levy, right? Grants, fees for services, intergovernmental charges, making sure that within our accounting system, and I do think this is one of the big advantages we have over with our new accounting system as opposed to our previous one, really dive into what are the funding allocations for individual employees to make sure that within our programs, are we able to charge anything else against a grant, for example? Some grants have capitation with regard to what we can recoup relative to wages, others do not. So let's make sure that if we have administrative resources supporting those grants, that we're maximizing our allocation to those things. Are they pure reimbursement? So within the highway department, are we ensuring that our billing procedures are allowing for that? I think it's helpful in framing that conversation with department heads. It also, one of the things I think the board is going to have to wrestle with is what is your strategy? John Rader alluded to this with, I think it was in response to a question about bonding. And I think it was Chair Gibbs asked about, how do rating agencies look at the county and how do we want to utilize when we utilize our general fund and our fund balance policy. You have some capital projects. You've done a lot of capital projects, as Chris just alluded to, that have increased building efficiency and will ultimately allow for consolidation. But the highway, potential relocation of the highway shop, is there a way to do that keeps us from having to borrow? Because right now if you go out to bond, you're at probably in that 4.5%, 5+% rate. We have borrowing outstanding through our other projects that are clearly, it's sub 2%. So we don't want to go out and undertake additional borrowing. How can we utilize that? How do you look at the levy, which is the total amount you're taking in through property tax, particularly on the operating side, but also the rate? Are there things that we can move relative to debt service that will limit your need to take on additional long-term debt that would otherwise increase the rate? So from a staffing standpoint, I think it's consistent with our general direction. It does make very clear the direction to department heads as I prepare my memo. I really want you to look at this. To Kim's point, where we don't have fees, or we have fees, I should say, that we haven't moved, the default needs to be move those fees, cover our cost where we're allowed to. That's what I would interpret in terms of direction from the amendment should it pass.
I just bring that up because I'm kind of bothered it's not my district, in my zip code, 54403. 60% of residents are homeowners, and that means 40% are not. And so there might be 40% who are not going to be impacted by a lower property tax bill because they're not paying for it. And I'm not hearing of many landlords that are passing on savings to their renters. Rents are continuing to go up, and I don't know that any tax cuts are going to balance that out. It just seems like we need to keep in mind the regressiveness of some of these fees that we're charging, that it is a higher burden on our lower income folks. And I just don't want to hamstring maybe the county by saying we're going to keep this level for, our taxpayers, which I agree with. I pay about $850 a month on my taxes. That's a lot of money. I'm happy to do that. I get a lot of benefit. I feel like the value is there. But I do worry about those lower income folks that might see higher fees, for instance, when they get married, and not a balance somewhere else to take that away.
So just kind of following up on the point from earlier with respect to the sales tax, so that's noted, and I appreciate that. There are a couple things that we can be supportive facilitating municipalities, not necessarily county-wide implementation, but there is the Premier Resort Area Tax, the PRAT. Marathon County itself cannot enact PRAT, but could encourage municipalities like Wausau, Rothschild, Mosinee to adopt and form intergovernmental compacts to share the revenue. In addition to that, municipal room lodging tax. So under Wisconsin state statute, cities and villages may levy up to 8% lodging tax for tourism activities. The county can help
Germane to the discussion on the amendment?
Is that germane to the amendment?
This is just in reference to.
If you could save that, because we have an amendment we technically have an amendment to a resolution that isn't before us. So, right, Mike, should we have a motion for adopting the budget priorities first, or are we amending it? I'm looking.
At the committee level, I think you're okay to be acting on the amendment at this time.
Save that. All right, so on the amendment, any other discussion on the amendment? If not, all those in favor of adoption of the amendment will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries, but it is not unanimous. Now, if you would like to, now again, these are the budget priorities.
So the county can help municipalities share to offset resident tax burdens, kind of as I had mentioned, with encouraging the cities and villages to levy up to 8% lodging tax for tourism activities. We had kind of touched on this as well. So long as the fees relate to services provided and residents aren't unfairly excluded, the county can implement tiered fees, higher for non-residents for parks, trails, boats, launches. We had touched on special events and vendor licensing fees as well. In addition to this, so infrastructure impact fees, so particularly relevant for new resorts. We had talked about new construction activities or commercial tourism zones. So I guess, really where I'm going with this is we might not necessarily be out of line in any sense with respect to the sales tax, but there is in fact opportunities as a whole for the county to offset the tax burden and to alleviate concerns regarding the tax levies by, sound fiscal policy that way.
I can guarantee you one thing, that if a local increases the room tax, the lodging tax, first of all, there's requirements that some of it be spent on promotion, tourism promotion, but they're not likely to share it. Just based on my past experience, if they're not likely to raise the tax and do that. But we can continue it. This discussion would be better in the earlier discussion that we had, and relative to the budget. We can certainly, I think what you are advocating is that for us to evaluate all sources of revenue available to the county in the context of developing the budget to minimize the impact of property taxes as a funding source. Is that a correct? So I think we can look at that. But there are limitations as to what we can and can't do and how the money can and cannot be allocated through the room and the boarding and premier tax and other things. But Mike, that may require some research on your part as to what options we have relative to expansion of funding sources within the county, within the current constraints of the state statutes.
And just for context, that's been the discussion with department heads is, look, are there opportunities for us to bring to the board the idea of a new fee? To get at, I think, what is that underlying sentiment? Now, of course, as I often say, we will bring you ideas and options, but at the end of the day, the ultimate decision on creating a new fee and what the fee should be is the board's. So we'll continue to update that fee schedule, and if anyone has an idea or a will to bring a recommendation forward, please let us know, and we can try to do that research to see if it's a viable, if it's legal, but then we can chart out for you what we might anticipate that additional revenue to be.
I would just like to point out, Supervisor or Vice Chair Marshall, if you look at number 3, and that health insurance proposed budget should maintain the quality healthcare program currently offered to employees while modifying benefits and/or increasing employer premiums to minimize increase in the levy. I think that might address the concern that you had. And while the cost may go up for budgeting purposes, I think the goal was to try to limit it. But I think this limits the impact of those increases on the levy and would then, I think, direct the administration to look for co-pays and/or additional contributions.
I was confused because with the 6.5%, that would seem to say that we're not really, or hopefully not taking too much of an increase, but I'm okay with the language. Thank you.
But I think that the context of the 6.5 is that's an expenditure side, not necessarily corresponding offsetting revenue. So I think we might be able to get at your goal through this language. Chair Gibbs.
Make a motion to approve the budget assumptions and move to the full board with the modifications that were just voted on.
Is there a second?
Priorities, excuse me, priorities.
Is there a second? Second by Vice Chair Marshall. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. All right. Budget transfer request to accept DNR grant in the amount of $8,000 for lake protection and shoreline improvements. Administrator Leonard or Lori? I'm not sure who's taking the lead on this.
Lori's walking up, so I'll talk while she's walking. Short answer, county staff, there's a memo in your packet on page 305. That outlines staff are always looking for new revenues to essentially allow services to be delivered at the lowest cost. So this is a budget amendment because we were awarded $8,000 through the DNR. take it away, Lori.
Yeah, I don't have too much else to add, except that we can work with landowners to pursue these grants, and by grouping them together, we stand a better chance to get those funds from the DNR. And the DNR did make us aware the money's available now, and we are ready to work with a group at Big Bass Lake to get these shoreline improvements done in August if we get that approval from County Board. So here to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? If not, what are your wishes? Vice Chair Marshall.
Move to approve the grant for the CBZ.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Clerk, we'll move on to educational presentation, clerk of court. Or, excuse me, county clerk. I think I've been here too long.
For a new position.
I've been here.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but
I'm just
She's
thinking
not
of,
here.
I'm sitting in the attorney's, the corporation counsel's chair, so maybe that's right.
okay, I will make this as brief as possible. First, a couple number updates. For Q2, we issued 197 passports, 216 passport photos, issued 163 marriage licenses, and distributed 2,109 dog licenses to municipal treasurers. We had one election, of course, that was on April 1st, the first day of the quarter, which was one of the highest turnout spring elections that we've had in many years, with 53,572 voters in Marathon County. At that election, we had 13 new municipal clerks elected or appointed. And since the election, we've had one clerk resign. So we have a total of 14 new municipal clerks. And Kelly is doing a great job working with them to get their election onboarding and training done and get them up to speed. Next week, we will be doing our every 2-year preventative maintenance on our machines. So this room will be full of election machines next week, with our fabulous vendor staff here doing all of our preventative maintenance. We published the directory in May, worked with municipal clerks to get all that information updated, and then David worked to get all of the new municipal officers updated on the website as well, because we had quite a bit of turnover this year with our municipal leadership. Some general office updates. We are working with municipalities to consolidate efforts in printing absentee ballot envelopes so that we can save everybody some money, because if we have a bigger order, it's cheaper to do that. So we're working with municipalities on that. We've had a couple evening hours during county board meetings and have continued to serve the public with those appointments for marriage licenses and passports. The mail folding machine is getting a good bit of use, but we could certainly do more work with that. David has been working with our mail vendor to come up with a process to simplify and save money on certified mailing, and we'll be able to save about $1.60 per certified mail piece that goes out with that new process. We had an exciting meeting this morning with Kelly and the Register and Probate, and an upcoming collaboration that we have between our two offices that we're very excited about. More details to come down the road. Just a couple personal updates. In June at our County Clerks Conference, I was elected as the vice chair of our County Clerks Association. I am currently vice chairing or co-chairing 3 of our standing committees. Also early in June, I had the privilege to travel to Tallahassee with 2 of my colleagues, one from Dane County and one from Dunn County, to present at a national election security conference. Because we do elections in Wisconsin so oddly that a lot of the election geeks around the country were really interested to learn what how we do elections. And so that was really an interesting time to collaborate with some other professionals. We've been working very closely with administration and corp counsel on tax deed and surplus properties, working to get those tax deeds all processed as they are taken, either by tax deed or in rem foreclosure. working with Gordy, our appraiser, to get those all scheduled so we can have an appraisal done and get those listed on Wisconsin Surplus just as quickly as we can after the properties are taken. We currently have one parcel listed on Wisconsin Surplus, and that is the property that you authorized us to sell last month, I believe, and that's the old community clubhouse property on North 3rd Avenue. We listed that. The bids are open for 30 days. Current bid on that is at $57,000. 19 days left, and of course, the reserve on that is the appraised value that we had of $133. So if we keep going at our current rate, we'll be well over that. So that's about it, unless anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions? First of all, congratulations on the election. Any questions? If not, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This portion will be briefer since we went through a little bit earlier. So the 2025 capital improvement projects for facilities are going well. We've been working well with Parks on the 9 Mile Chalet project. Those sort of fundamental needs, roofing and a bathroom remodel and the septic system, those are all completed or near complete. The fair's coming up soon, so that's stretching Parks a little bit, but that project as a whole is going very well. And then similarly, we've been working with Highway to do facility audits on all our satellite locations. So we've met with the team down there. We've got plans in place for all the things that should be addressed. This year, we're focusing more intently on the Hatley shop. So that's all going very well in terms of identifying issues, meeting with the department, and then putting a plan together to resolve those. We had a retirement earlier this year, so we recently completed recruitment, so we'll be fully staffed again soon. We're nearly complete with updating the carpet, paint, and other items in the former finance department area. The DA's office will be moving into that space once everything's completed. We continue to work closely with administration and highway on the planning efforts associated with the potential new highway location, including the RFP for design services that's out on the street. There'll be a pre-proposal meeting coming up soon, which is mandatory, so that any interested firms are going to have to come in and meet with us and see where things are at and then get their questions answered there. We were not satisfied with the landscaping work that was done at the Lakeview campus in front of the Lakeview Conference Center, so we held the funding back and didn't pay for it. And then we repurposed the funding to get Parks in there. And so Parks came in, undid everything that was poorly done before, and they've really turned it around and made it look excellent, which was our stress to them, is that this is what people see when they drive on a campus. This is the first thing they see, so it needs to look good. And so they just finished hydroseeding that area this week. I think for the asset management update, that's Cartograph, that implementation has gone very well compared to others that I've been involved with. Part of that's the work that was done directly with the company versus a third-party implementer. So anytime you have an issue or a question or you're doing the setup of the system, you're working with the company representative themselves, both remotely and also in person. We had several training sessions. We had a lot of staff attend those so that people could start wrapping their heads around it. But between Parks, CCITC, and facilities and Cartograph, that implementation has been very successful, in my opinion. So far, we've added over 500 corrective tasks between Parks and facilities. They've been entered and assigned in Cartograph, so those would be things that could feasibly happen throughout the year in terms of maintenance, work orders, and the like. Parks has been able to streamline their previous manual process, and staff are able to receive and update their work in real time when in the field, which is a big deal. The Parks mechanics have also embraced the product since the beginning, and they're using that to manage all the maintenance on their significant equipment inventory. The next steps for both facilities and Parks will be looking at making sure that all the preventative maintenance tasks are set up and scheduled in the system appropriately, and then continue to roll out the product to additional requesters, AKA departments in the organization. Currently, we're still using a hybrid approach with the email for work orders, but we've been bringing departments in chunks to get them used to submitting work orders through Cartograph. We also, thought a lot about what departments are going to see when they use the system. So we simplified the interface for them. There's really only 4 fields of information to enter. They have to enter all 4 of them in order for the work order to be processed. So that makes it super easy for departments to use the system, and then leaves the complicated parts to us in terms of, tracking the tasks, assigning the tasks, and then also getting into the weeds. So right now we're focusing on the basics, but we already know there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what we can do within the system. So as we get the fundamentals done, we're going to shift over to adding assets, adding the information relative to the asset. You can do mapping through each floor to locate where the item is, so you're not popping a ceiling tile, looking around for what you're trying to fix. You can even log past things to say, well, there was a leak here. So if there was a recurring issue, you might check that space first. So there's a lot of, it's a very dynamic tool. The facility staff that have been using it, they've been able to adapt to it pretty easily. There's a few adjustments and some automation suggestions. There's an AI tool within it. You can automate a lot of the process that they've suggested. And our de facto department lead, Chad Carson, he really took to the system. He's been able to go in and take the feedback from staff and even from Parks and working with Darren at IT to go into the bowels of the system and make the changes that people are looking for. So on the whole, that is going to be a real net positive long term, but even in near term, people are, as far as change management goes and using a new system and adapting to it, things are going very well.
Okay, any questions for Chris? You've got a full plate.
Yes, sir.
Appropriate for a deputy administrator in charge of public works and capital projects, yeah. Any questions? If not, we look forward to continued updates. We'll probably have a number of updates in the context of the KIP and the budget. And your job just got more challenging with the funding. Or easier. All right. Anything else to come before us today? Any items for future discussion? I think we've got our agenda set with the budget coming up for a while. All right, our next meeting is August 13th. And what are your wishes relative to item? Chair Gibbs moves to adjourn, seconded by Supervisor Poole. All those in favor of adjournment will signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. We are adjourned.